Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something I bet you handle every day without even thinking about it.
Let me guess.
U.S. currency. Those dollar bills we all know and love.
Ah, yeah, we all use them, but do we really know them?
Exactly. Have you ever stopped and really looked at those presidential faces? Staring back at you from those bills? I mean, it's like a pocket history lesson every time you open your wallet.
Yeah, I've always wondered why those particular presidents got the honor of being on our money.
It's a great question. And that's what we're going to unpack today using this awesome article from thecollector.com called Which Presidents Are in Your Wallet? The Faces of U.S. Dollar Bills.
Oh, that sounds like a fascinating read. So are we gonna rank them from best to worst or something?
Uh-huh. Not quite. But we are going to dive deep into the history behind each bill and the president featured on it.
It's really interesting that the U.S. chose to feature its past presidents so prominently on its currency.
Yeah, it's not like other countries.
Right. Many other countries use contemporary figures or national symbols, but here in the U.S., we're all about these historical heavy hitters.
So true. Okay, so let's start with the OG, the one we all know and love.
Oh, you mean?
The $1 bill featuring the always stoic George Washington.
Yeah, can't go wrong with good old George. Seems like a pretty obvious choice, right? Father of his country, set tons of precedents as the first president.
I mean, yeah, hard to argue with that.
Exactly. But you know what? Believe it or not, Washington wasn't always a fixture on the dollar bill.
Wait, what? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, the very first $1 bills issued during the Civil War back in 1862 featured Salmon P. Chase.
Salmon P. Who now?
Salmon P. Chase, Lincoln's Treasury Secretary.
Never heard of him.
Most people haven't. Can you imagine pulling that out of your wallet today?
That would be pretty wild.
Uh,
So why him? What happened?
well, the Civil War was a time of immense financial instability.
It makes sense.
And the U.S. government was experimenting with different forms of currency, like United States notes and later silver certificates.
Oh, I've heard of those. Like those old-timey bills you see in museums.
Exactly. They were basically promises that you could exchange them for a certain amount of silver.
So like IOUs for silver?
Pretty much. It was all about trying to stabilize the monetary system during a very chaotic time.
That's so interesting. But when did Washington finally get his rightful place on the $1
Now,
bill?
it took a few years, but his image finally appeared on the $1 bill in 1869.
Okay, so just a few years after those Salmon P. Chase bills.
Yep. But even then, the design looked very different from what we see today.
How so?
Well, for one thing, it wasn't a single portrait like we have now. It was a more elaborate vignette with multiple figures and scenes.
Oh, wow. I'd love to see one of those.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. They really reflect the artistic styles of the time. And it wasn't until much later that the iconic portrait we know and love became the standard.
You know what else I've always been curious about? All the symbolism on the dollar bill.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot going on there.
It's like they crammed every symbolic image they could fit onto that little piece of paper. You've got the pyramid with the Eye of Providence, the bald eagle. It's like a Where's Waldo of American symbolism.
Haha, that's a great way to put it. But you're right, there's a lot packed into that design. And it's all very intentional, of course.
Okay, so break it down for me. What's it all about?
Well, Washington himself, of course, represents leadership and the very foundation of the nation. Makes sense, right?
Totally. And then you have that bald eagle, a classic symbol of America.
Yeah, representing freedom and strength.
But what about that pyramid with the all-seeing eye? That one always kind of freaked me out as a kid.
Ah, the Eye of Providence. That one has sparked endless debates and conspiracy theories over the years.
Seriously, it's like fuel for conspiracy theorists. What does it actually mean?
Well, that's the thing. It depends on who you ask. Some people see it as a benevolent symbol of divine guidance, looking over and protecting the nation.
Okay, I can see that.
Others see it as a more ominous representation of government surveillance and control, like Big Brother's always watching.
Yeah, I can see that too.
It's a powerful reminder that even something as seemingly simple as a dollar bill can be interpreted in very different ways.
That is so cool. Okay, so we've tackled the $1 bill, but there are so many other presidents waiting for their close-up.
So many presidents, so little time. Who's next on our deep dive?
Let's move on to the $2 bill and the man who penned those famous words. All men are created equal.
Oh, you mean Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, champion of liberty and equality. Seems like a no-brainer for U.S. currency.
Right. You'd think he'd be a slam dunk.
But remember, history is rarely black and white.
Oh, here we go.
Jefferson's legacy is complex, especially when you consider his ownership of slaves.
Yeah, that's a tough one to reconcile.
It really is. It's a glaring contradiction to his pronouncements about freedom and individual rights.
It's like those two sides of him just clash.
Exactly. And it makes you think about the choices we make when we elevate certain historical figures to hero status, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely makes you think. Okay, so how did a slave owner end up on the $2 bill? Did people just not know about that back then?
Well, it's hard to say for sure what was going through people's minds back then, but it's important to remember that historical figures were often viewed differently in their own time than they are today.
That's true. Like, standards change, perspectives evolve.
Right. And it's worth noting that even the $2 bill itself has gone through some interesting design changes over the years, reflecting those changing perspectives, maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, initially, believe it or not, the $2 bill actually featured Alexander Hamilton.
No way. Hamilton was on the $2 bill.
Yep. But then there was a period where it showcased the U.S. Capitol building instead.
So no presidents at all on those ones.
Nope, just the Capitol. And finally, it settled on the design we know today, featuring Jefferson's Monticello home.
That's so interesting. It's like the bill itself has gone through its own transformations over time.
Exactly. Almost like mirroring the evolution of how we view Jefferson and his place in history with all its complexities.
That is a really fascinating point. You know what else I've noticed about the $2 bill?
What's that?
You rarely see them in circulation these days. Like, I can't remember the last time I got one as change.
Uh-huh. Yeah. They become a bit of a rarity.
It's like they're almost collector's items now.
Maybe that adds to their mystique. But whatever the reason, they're definitely not as common as they used to be.
Okay, well, let's move on to a president whose face you do see quite often. The $5 bill, and the man who guided the nation through one of its most tumultuous periods, Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln, the great emancipator. His image on the $5 bill seems pretty fitting considering his role in the Civil War, ending slavery and preserving the Union.
Definitely an iconic image, for sure. But you know what's really interesting about Lincoln's image on the $5 bill?
Fill me in.
He was actually a sitting president when it first appeared, back in 1862.
Oh, wow, you're right. I never thought about that. So unlike most of the other presidents who were featured posthumously, Lincoln got the honor while he was still in office.
Exactly. It really speaks volumes about the respect and admiration he commanded, even in the middle of the Civil War.
He must have already been considered a legend at that point.
Right. But even Lincoln wasn't immune to the ever-changing world of currency design.
What do you mean?
There was actually a time when his face wasn't on the $5 bill.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. For a while, the $5 silver certificate featured Ulysses S. Grant, alongside Running Antelope.
Running Antelope. Now, that's a name I haven't heard in a while.
He was a Lakota chief, known for his efforts to maintain peace with white settlers.
Right. And he even signed a treaty with the U.S. government, didn't he?
He did. The Treaty of 1868. But unfortunately, the U.S. government later broke that treaty.
Oh, no, really? That's terrible.
It is. And that broken treaty and the subsequent conflict with Native Americans actually played a role in Lincoln's image returning to the $5 bill in 1899.
Wow, I never knew that.
Right.
So those bills we carry around, they're not just about pretty pictures and historical figures.
Oh, really aren't.
They're interwoven with the complexities of our history, both the good and the bad.
That's a powerful realization. Okay, so we've talked about Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. Are you ready to tackle a president who's been at the center of a lot of controversy lately?
Bring it on. Who are we talking about?
The $20 bill and the ever-so-fiery Andrew Jackson.
Ah, old Hickory. Now there's a complex figure for you.
That's an understatement. On the one hand, he was the people's president, a champion of individual liberty, and a war hero.
Right. Can't forget about his victory at the Battle of New Orleans.
Exactly. But then there's that whole dark side to his legacy, the really awful stuff.
You mean his treatment of Native Americans?
Exactly. Specifically, the forced removal of tribes from their ancestral lands.
Ugh, the Trail of Tears. One of the most shameful chapters in American history.
It really is. And it's hard to square that with the image of a president who's supposed to represent our nation's values.
It's a huge contradiction, and that's why there's been such a push to redesign the $20 bill and replace Jackson with a figure who embodies a more inclusive and just vision of America.
And that brings us to Harriet Tubman.
A true American hero, risking her life countless times to lead enslaved people to freedom on the Underground Railroad.
Just imagine the power of having her face on our currency. It would be a monumental shift in how we represent our nation's history.
It really would. But as you know, the implementation of the redesign has been delayed, which has sparked a lot of debate and frustration.
It has. And those delays, they make you wonder what they signify, don't they?
They do. It's almost like the $20 bill has become a battleground for competing visions of what America stands for and who deserves to be honored on our currency.
It's so much more than just a piece of paper, isn't it?
You got that right. It's a reflection of our values, our struggles, and the ongoing conversation about how we tell our national story.
So much depth packed into a simple bill.
That's the beauty of it. There's always more to uncover. It really is fascinating to think about, how a simple piece of currency can spark such complex conversations about identity and representation and, like the very soul of a nation.
So true. It's like we're holding a tiny mirror up to America and seeing all its complexities reflected back at us.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Speaking of reflections, let's shift gears to the $50 bill and the man who led the Union to victory in the Civil War,
Oh, you mean Ulysses S. Grant?
the one and only.
Grant is an intriguing figure, wouldn't you say? I mean, his image on the $50 bill actually predates his presidency. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah, I did know that, actually. He was already a national hero, for his military accomplishments, when his portrait first graced the bill way back in 1869.
Yeah, so unlike Lincoln, Grant achieved currency fame before stepping into the Oval Office.
Exactly. It seems like his military genius earned him a one-way ticket to the $50 bill.
You could say that. His strategic brilliance during the Civil War definitely solidified his place in American history.
But his presidency, well, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, you're right about that.
I remember reading about all the scandals that plagued his administration, despite his efforts to rebuild the nation and support equal rights for freed slaves. It seems like a classic case of a war hero struggling to navigate the complexities of peacetime leadership.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even the most celebrated figures have their flaws and contradictions, right? I mean, Grant's story, it's a real mix of triumphs and failures, and that complexity is, part of what makes him such a compelling figure.
Definitely. It adds another layer to the $50 bill, wouldn't you say? It's not just about commemorating a war hero. It's also about acknowledging the challenges and imperfections that come with leadership.
Yeah.
And speaking of layers, the design of the $50 bill itself adds yet another dimension to Grant's story. Did you know the back of the bill features Grant's memorial in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, it's a powerful symbol of his role as general of the Union forces, for sure.
And if you think about it, that memorial is strategically positioned right in front of the U.S. Capitol, the heart of American democracy.
So they're connected in a way.
Right. It's like they intentionally created this visual link between Grant's military leadership and the nation's governing body.
It's a subtle but brilliant design choice.
I agree. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into U.S. currency, it's clear that these presidential faces staring back at us from our wallets represent so much more than just, monetary value.
It's about history. It's about who we are as a nation. It's about the stories we tell ourselves.
And what stories we choose to elevate, right? I mean, it makes you wonder what criteria were used to select these specific presidents.
Yeah, like was it purely based on their accomplishments or were there other factors at play?
It's a fascinating question.
It really is. I mean, the choices made about who to feature on our currency, it reflects the values and priorities of the time period in which those decisions were made.
Right. So, imagine if they were choosing presidents for currency today.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Would the same faces make the cut?
That's a great question. Who would it be today?
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
It makes you wonder what the future of U.S. currency design holds, right?
What do you think will happen?
I mean, will we see more changes reflecting a more inclusive and diverse America, like we've been discussing with the potential redesign of the $20 bill?
Yeah. And beyond specific individuals, what about other symbols or themes that could better capture, the essence of America today? What would you choose?
That's a tough one.
Right. Could we move beyond presidents altogether?
Oh, interesting idea.
Yeah. And feature, say, achievements in science or technology or the arts, or even the natural beauty of the country or, its incredibly diverse cultural heritage.
All amazing ideas.
So to all our listeners out there, if you were designing U.S. currency today, what would you choose to represent the nation's values and aspirations? Something to ponder.
It really gets you thinking.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to, how much thought and symbolism goes into something as seemingly mundane as the money in our pockets.
Yeah, it really makes you appreciate the power of those little pieces of paper.
It really is amazing, isn't it? How something we use every day, something as familiar as a dollar bill, can hold so much meaning, and,
Yeah.
and spark such interesting conversations.
Yeah, it's a testament to the power of symbolism. Those bills are like miniature time capsules carrying with them, the weight of history, the complexities of our national identity, the ongoing debate about, who we are as a nation.
And who we aspire to be right. Like
Mhm.
those choices about who to feature on our currency, they're not just random decisions. They're reflections of our values, our priorities, the stories we choose to tell about ourselves.
Exactly. It's like holding a tiny piece of the American narrative right there in your hand.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. So to all our listeners out there, the next time you pull out a dollar bill, don't just see it as a way to, buy your morning coffee.
Yeah, take a moment to really look at it.
Yeah, consider the face staring back at you.
Think about the layers of history embedded in that piece of paper.
It's more than just money.
Yeah, ask yourself, what does this bill represent? What stories does it tell? And how does it connect to the larger story of America, both past and present?
Because those presidential faces, those symbols, those seemingly insignificant details, they all come together to paint this fascinating picture of who we are, where we've been, and where we might be headed.
And who knows, maybe one day it'll be your face on that dollar bill representing the values and aspirations of a future America.
Uh-huh. Now that's a thought. But for now, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going. Thanks for joining us on this journey through U.S. currency.